He thumbed up me. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular board meeting of the Royal Oak Schools, February 8th, 2024. Can we stand for the pledge, please? Thank you. Item 3, standing approval items. 3.1, acceptance of the agenda. Do we have any additions or deletions? Seeing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Item 3.2, approval of minutes. Can I have a recommendation, please? Mr. Jaworski.
Resolved that the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education approves the following minutes. January 11th, 2024, the special minutes of Finance and Facilities. January 11th, 2024, the regular minutes.
Thank you. Can I have a second? Mrs. Haynes? Can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
Trustee Jasinski?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, a person may address the board on an agenda or non-agenda item by completing a note card located inside the boardroom and place the card in the basket prior to the citizen public comment period. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. If you need more time and are offered a second opportunity to address the board at the end of the meeting with an additional 3 minutes, please address the board as a whole and not individually. Public comment is not intended for the exchange of dialogue. This is a time for members of the public to express their views. We are paying attention to your comments and appreciate them. However, school board members do not respond to public comment during the meeting. Questions that arise from public comment shall be referred to the superintendent or their designee for review, study, and possible future response. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. And we do not have any public comment at this time. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, proclamations and recognitions. 5.1, board proclamation, Black History Month. Can I have a recommendation? Ms. Yashinsky?
You don't mind? Whereas African Americans have made significant cultural, historical, and economic contributions to the development of America and the American way of life, and whereas Carter G. Woodson created Negro History Week in 1926 to rectify the omission of African Americans from history books and to encourage the study of the history and lives of all Americans, including African Americans, in the nation's public schools. And whereas, after being expanded to a month in 1976, every U.S. president, beginning with Michigan's own President Gerald R. Ford, officially designated the month of February as Black History Month every year. And whereas since then, the celebration of Black History Month has been important to appreciating and recognizing the crucial roles African Americans have played in the creation of America and their inalienable rights to be treated equally while increasing the visibility of African American life and history. And whereas the state of Michigan also recognizes the strength, endurance, and faith of African American ancestors in their struggle for freedom and pays tribute to their continuous pursuit of overcoming injustices. And whereas studying this important part of our history and reflecting on the burdens of racial prejudice and stereotypes can open the door to innovative ideas and provide insight into building an environment in Michigan that supports our continued efforts to combat racism, to strive toward racial equity, and to be a place of freedom, opportunity, and inclusiveness for everyone. And whereas during this month, we should take time to recognize and celebrate African Americans' contributions, sacrifices, and bravery on their journey to justice in our nation, and work together to identify, develop, and implement solutions to further achieve equity in our state, as well as promote unity not only within the Black community, but across all individuals and communities throughout our state, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, and any other expressions of identity. Now, therefore, the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education proclaims February 2024 as Black History Month in Royal Oak Schools.
Thank you. Can I have a second, please? Mrs. Alexander, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Jasinski?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
The proclamation passes.
Thank you. Item 5.2, Board Proclamation, Career and Tech Ed Month, Technical Education Month. Can I have a recommendation, please? Mrs. Alexander.
Whereas career and technical education in Michigan prepares students at the secondary and post-secondary levels to have the academic, technical, and work behavior skills to enter, compete, and advance in education and their careers. And whereas career and technical education offers a diverse delivery system that provides students with leadership opportunities in various career fields, allowing for the rigorous and relevant application of workplace skills while incorporating reading, writing, and mathematics. And whereas career and technical education programs serve as a career and college-ready connection and are the foundations of a strong and well-educated workforce and should be available to students in every corner of Michigan. Whereas career and technical education offers students opportunities to earn college credit, industry certification, and licenses in high-wage, high-skill, and in-demand fields as aligned with the Michigan's Top 10 Strategic Education Plan to expand secondary learning opportunities for all students and increase the percentage of adults with a post-secondary credential. And whereas career and technical education provides students with work-based learning experiences to provide Michigan with a highly skilled, sustainable workforce, which will help achieve the state's goals of reaching a 60% post-secondary education attainment rate by 2030. And whereas according to the Michigan Department of Education, career and technical education enrollment in Michigan continued to rise by 2.6% in 2022 to 2023 to 108,874 students enrolled in CTE compared to 2021-22 with 106,077 students, and CTE program completers increased by 8.4%. From 44,609 in 2021-22 to 48,334 in 22-23. And whereas during this month, we joined the Michigan Department of Education, the Michigan Department of Lifelong Education, Advancement and Potential, the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, and the Michigan Association for Career and Technical Education, to encourage youth and adults in Michigan to be ambassadors for career and technical education and to send the message that Michigan career and technical education students are prepared for 21st century high-wage, high-skilled, and in-demand jobs. Now, therefore, the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education proclaims February 2024 as Career and Technical Education Month in Royal Oak Schools.
Thank you. Can I have a second? Mrs. Anderson? Can we have a roll call, please?
I will vote yes. Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
Trustee Jasinski?
Yes.
The proclamation carries.
I would like to send out a huge thank you to our counselors. This is I call it Counselor Celebration Week, but just the acknowledgement of all the work that our counselors do throughout the district and the importance of that role that they serve for our students and our staff and everybody. So we didn't have a proclamation, but I wanted to make sure and provide that acknowledgement of them and the work that they do, which is so critical to our district. So. Moving on to item number 6, presentations and reports. 6.1, diversity, equity, inclusion. Ms. Phillips.
Good evening. I have just a few updates to share with you all. It's been a very busy time between our last 2 meetings. So we'll be talking quickly about the African American Read-In event coming up soon and about school visits and some different things that have been going on. So the DEI department is partnering with the curriculum department to bring our African American Read-In event. It'll be here in this room on February 29th. And we will be featuring virtually our featured author, Don Tate. The great thing is this is a partnership with Oakland Schools, so the students will be receiving a copy of the book, Jerry Changed the Game, each family receives one free copy of that book as well. The school visits continue. Over the last 5 school weeks, I've presented to 561 students, not including facilitating some of the clubs as well. We've involved some parental involvement this time, and I'm so glad that I've had some volunteers to come out to help that were representing JEDI and PAC as well. And for the best feedback always comes from the students. As I'm packing up and leaving buildings, I always get a few that stop and ask their teacher if they can come over and talk to me, and they have always just said, thank you so much for coming. This was amazing. Can you please come back and talk to my little brother's class or my little sister's class, and when are you coming back to see it? So I always love that. So I've included a few different pictures for you all for our last visit, and for this one we were able to do it right in the classroom, which made it even more personal. These were our 4th and 5th grade students at Keller. Their IB learner profile for the month of February actually aligned with my message of empathy, so we put our caring and empathy message there. Students get to integrate tech here, so you'll see them playing some games, getting shout outs from their friends for answers, and we also included some musical items. And our tech team in the back, the students get to go into different tech rotations and use technology as a tool to talk about DEI at their tables. I wanted to share this one with you all. I'll read a few of the selections, but towards the end of our presentation, I always ask the students, what does DEI mean to you? They get to huddle up in a group with me and speak on the microphone. They get to talk at their tables or their carpet spaces, and they also get to talk at their tech tables and and shout out the answers right into the computer. So I just opened them up so you could see them a little bit better, but I'll read the first 3 on the side. To me, DEI means being loved and cared about. DEI is something that everyone should have. Everyone is different and unique. You should always be you. To treat everyone the way you should. Everyone should have access to equal opportunities. You should be cared for because you deserve it. What DEI means to me is a classroom or family, and to not judge people on how they look. This is from some of our 5th grade students at Keller, so I just love hearing all of those meaningful insights there. For DEI progression and professional development, I've been meeting with different district clubs, student clubs, and parent groups as well as taking part of my continual learning. I want to always stay current on everything as much as possible. So with Oakland Schools, I'm enrolled in their Citizens of Iniquity series. We've been talking about chronic absenteeism, and next week we're going to talk about disparities in discipline data. And with the Michigan Department of Education, the MDE LGBTQ+ Students Project. Last week we talked about staying current on a lot of our legal policies, and today we talked about laying the foundation and understanding the identities and experiences of students right here in Michigan. For our JEDI meetings, last week we started our session 1 of implicit bias. We have tripled our student participation, and that number is going to continually increase because they are on a student rotation now where they'll come as they can to different meetings and rotate throughout the diversity club as well. And we were provided with some real-time student input and insight during the meetings where they could voice their opinions and tell us what's happening in the classroom. And some of the members of the Royal Oak High School Diversity Club were able to share some future plans that tied in right with DEI as well. And lastly, for our MDE news, the Michigan Department of Education is celebrating Black History Month, and they reached out to us in January to have some input from a lot of our educators. They asked, what are you teaching in Black history? When do you teach this? And what is your why for teaching this? Because we had a very abbreviated window to turn in the submissions, I reached out to principals and teachers and I said, if you could at least just send over your lessons to me, I'll be able to submit the surveys, because it was about a 3-page survey for each teacher, and just include all of their information. So we had a lot of submissions. One was a big team submission as well, and it represented elementary, middle, and high school for all of our Royal Oak schools. So we're really excited. And the biggest drum roll comes to the second part of it, where the MDE also said if these teachers opt into to agreeing to have their lessons shared with the state of Michigan, then they may be selected to be added to our Black History calendar. this was very exciting because we know that as a community of excellence, we are a model district. So we were able to show other districts just different things that we've been doing. And so far, 2 of our educators have been selected. Mrs. Maria Manolias is not here today, but she is featured in the 2nd week. And I'm just going to read out her why for why do you teach Black history. Maria said, "It's so important for my students to see themselves reflected in the curriculum. When they don't, they lose motivation and their sense of belonging. Given that we are with our students for so much of the year, I find it important to devote time to celebrating each of my students' histories. So I'm so excited that Maria was selected. Jennifer Van Every is also selected and will be featured next week. And the great news is she's here to celebrate with us. So she's going to come up very soon to talk about it. But they also said that they are looking to select at least one more submission for Royal Oak because they said we had so many great things that were sent in. So at this time, I'm going to invite Jennifer up to talk about her lesson.
Thank you very much. My submission actually was not just one lesson. I started with the fact that I believe very strongly that Black history is American history and does not just happen in 1 month out of the year. So we celebrate Black history throughout the entire year for 4th and 5th grade. I wanted to give a shout out to our partners at Oakland Schools, Molly Gale, Stacy Woodward, and Christopher Lee, because they were the ones who rewrote the 4th and 5th grade social studies units for us to use, for anybody in Oakland County and beyond to use. And they've done such a wonderful job of integrating the histories into all of those lessons. So 4th grade started last month with our deep dive into the Underground Railroad and the contributions of people as it relates to that. We always try to find some sort of Michigan or a Detroit connection if possible, and the kids get really excited. Oh, they talked about Michigan, that person was there. So that's very exciting for us. My 5th graders actually start the year, our entire Unit 1 is all about perspectives, and we spend the rest of the year considering all perspectives when learning our inquiry lessons. And so we have to see, for 5th grade, it's U.S. history from the beginning of land to the American Revolution. So we start with, well, what are the perspectives when we first start with land and what we know as the Americas? We consider indigenous perspectives, African perspectives, and then European perspectives. And we're always looking at sources. I actually had somebody say the other day when we were looking at a timeline, they're like, but what's missing from this timeline? Because everything that people put out there, they have to select what they want to include. They're starting to think about, but what was not included, and why wasn't it included, and how can we hear that voice as well? So I'm really proud of the progress my students have made. We do then give even more focus in February. I like to introduce either a person, an event, or a group of people that have celebrated their lives as Black Americans and what their contributions are in the past, present, and who we're gonna look to in the future. And so we start each class of social studies this month with a real short video or a clip or a reading about someone or an event, and then we kind of discuss what did we already know and how can this help us in the future. So that's what we do at Upton.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Jaworski.
I really don't have questions, but I have so many comments. First, I want to thank Ms. Phillips for your great work you've done so far. I think you've made great strides in your time here. And I especially want to thank Ms. Van Every. I mean, you've taken what is a priority of this board and has been a very well-known priority of this board and made it into your dedication in your classroom. And I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, thank you so much. I know to our staff, Ms. Van Every, for being here, and for Ms. Phillips for just, doing this great work, and excited to have the kids engaged and excited in the work as well, and just, being educated, right? And so it's so important, the message that we share and we continue to promote, so I'm just really happy about that. Very proud. And Thank you for making the rounds as well, Ms. Phillips. It's really, I know I was able to see you on the PTA DEI committee meeting as well, so. And I have to give you a shout out. I was telling Mrs. Fitzpatrick, I was so impressed, it was like a 7 o'clock on a whatever night, and everybody's tired, but you're, with your daughter doing something, but yet you're still, on the call, and you're presenting from your car because you're waiting for your daughter. I said, okay, I appreciate that. I think that's really important. And I know a lot of our staff, we go above and beyond a lot of times, and so I know I'm very appreciative of that, so thank you. Oh, Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
Well, thank you, Ms. Van Every, for being here, and really to Ms. Phillips and all of our staff that submitted the lesson plans and ideas to the state of Michigan. It's one thing to work within your own grade level, your own school, or even across the district, but when you listen closely to the connections with Oakland schools, colleagues across the county, and then being willing to put yourself out there and share what you know and what you've developed with fellow educators across the state is really a testament to your dedication to it, and then to the quality of the work that you do every day in our district. And I'm really proud to see Royal Oak Schools featured up there for the rest of the state to see. So just thank you to everyone who coordinated this and for taking the time to do that, because that is another step above and beyond what you're doing with our students, but much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6.2, student representatives to the board. Alex and Matthew.
Good evening. We have a lot to talk about. A lot's been going on. Mostly I'm going to talk about signing day because I think it's very important and it highlights how students are achieving, academically and in sports and things of that nature. I've witnessed multiple people get scholarships to very good colleges recently and in the last year for their academic achievements and their achievements out on the field, and I think that's beneficial for our district, and it shows what kind of things we're capable of here.
And then, as Ms. Phillips mentioned earlier, Jedi met late last month, and I had the privilege of being there as well as two of my classmates who are in the diversity club. And I think it's really great to see a lot more student input and even some leaders from our diversity club at the high school attending those meetings. So we're happy to be there, and thank you for being so welcoming. Also, today was one of our board lunches, and we had a decent amount of student input on a few different topics, but one of them of interest was the searching of a new space to house a field for the robotics team. So it's interesting when we have these lunches to see students with a wide range of interests and maybe not much prior experience with the board, or maybe they have a little bit, but come and sort of address different areas of interest within the district. So I think going forward, I might like to use this time to highlight a few of these different areas within the school, within some clubs, within certain classes, and sort of bring it to the attention of the board and the community, and sort of shout out these organizations that maybe go unseen or maybe are doing great work that I think just deserve a shout out. So it was brought to my attention that the robotics club wanted the space, and I was thinking about all the accolades that they've won and how they've been a really strong team in the local region and even on the national stage. So I'd just like to shout out our Royal Oak High School First Robotics team for the good work that they've done so far.
Thank you. Any questions for our students? Ms. Jasinski.
I could have asked Ms. Phillips this too, so maybe you'll have a contribution, but is there, I know all of the conversations that happen at Jedi are usually pretty complex, right, and involve a whole lot of stakeholders, but were there any kind of main takeaways, positives, negatives, just things that the students did talk about? Because I know that that's one of the first times that you've kind of had that opportunity to share within that group, right?
So I think one of the main things from the student perspective in Jedi is sort of just learning about not just yourself and where you come from, but where your classmates come from, their backgrounds, and also your teachers' backgrounds and your community members' backgrounds. Like, you learn so many things about people in your community that you might not have known before, and that sort of community building session before the meat of the topic sort of gets you in the right mindset to think about DEI, because you sort of become comfortable with the people in the room. So it was good to get to know a little bit more about some of my classmates and some of the board members who were there and other members of the community, some of my teachers who were there. So I think those community building sessions are really important. And then as well, having students share always helps to add that input from the students who are in the buildings and are being directly affected by the DEI policies of the district. So I think it's a very constructive environment.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Jaworski and I were able to be at the lunches today, and so it's always a nice opportunity, and I'm just appreciative of students that are willing to come and sit and eat lunch with us. You know, I know it's a time that you usually want to spend with your friends because those opportunities are, you know, sometimes challenging. So I think it was a really good session. I'm always appreciative of the students willing to do that, and, you know, encourage anybody to, you know, to join. I know the communication about, you know, we continually find ways to reach out to students, and I think this month, every time there's a little bit more improvements, I'm really happy to hear that more parents heard about it and kind of say to their kids, "Oh, hey, did you hear about this?" And you know, but it's just an opportunity for us to listen and have conversation with students. So it's really always very critical to hear your voice. So I'm very grateful for that. Okay, moving on to item number 7, communications. Mrs. Anderson.
We've had a few since our last meeting. Claire Johnson about implementing Indigenous education initiatives. Erin McNitt asking whether there would be a virtual option for the social media session. Al Carter about the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Paul Urbiel regarding maintenance procedures on district property. Brandon Dalziel about a school cancellation. Sarah Boswell regarding district policy for medication administration. And Marcella Rogers regarding a policy change in the special education department.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, consent agenda. At this time, we have item 8.1, payment of expenses. Do we have any additions or deletions? Seeing none, consent agenda passes as presented. Item 9, matters for discussion action, 9.1, Superintendent, Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you very much. Well, as you stated earlier, February 5th through 9th is the National School Counseling Week, and so I just wanted to take this opportunity to give a huge shout out to all of the counselors in our district that provide vital services and really reach out to our students to create those relationships and give them people that can support them even more beyond our classrooms in all of our schools. And this day, this week, was established to focus public attention on the unique contribution of school counselors within U.S. school systems. The National School Counseling Week highlights the tremendous impact that school counselors can have in helping students achieve school success and plan for a career. National School Counseling Week is always celebrated this week in February, and we know that our counselors go above and beyond scheduling and counseling on an academic basis, but dig deeper into the support for our students' social and emotional well-being. So thank you to all of the counselors in Royal Oak Schools for all the work that they do. We also have some of our students being highlighted in a special exhibition on February the 10th this week. The board has heard several times that our Beyond the Bell program, using grant funds from the state of Michigan, has given our students opportunities after school. So Jennifer Nipper in our curriculum department has been working on that. But we've had the unique opportunity to have 14 of our Royal Oak High School students involved at the Cranbrook Institute for the past month as part of our Beyond the Bell outreach program. These students worked on an exhibit that they will be presenting this Saturday publicly. It's called At the Boiling Point. Climate change and its impact on ocean life, and it's a wonderful flyer highlighting the students of Royal Oak High School and that they will be there presenting it. So it is on February the 10th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Cranbrook Institute of Science. So for anyone who would like to come out, it's just another connection we were able to make for our students, so much appreciate that. And then also I'd like to have an item drawn to your attention this evening, item 9.1.1. We've talked before that the board has a policy committee that meets regularly. through the advisement by our Neola services, the representatives that give us guidance for all board policy. That committee has met and has several policies as presented in your packet this evening for your consideration, and this would be the first reading of those policies and guidelines.
Thank you. Ms. Jasinski.
Do I need to read all the numbers? Okay. There's a lot of them. Resolved that the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education approves the first reading of the policies and administrative guidelines being revised, replaced, and/or recommended as presented in the board packet.
Can I have a second? Mrs. Alexander? Any discussion? Mr. Jaworski?
Just want to take the opportunity to thank the policy committee for taking the policies that we removed from the minutes, or from the agenda 2 months ago, I believe, and revisiting those and making the necessary changes to make it palatable, I guess, for the rest of the board. Thank you for your work.
Ms. Jasinski?
Yeah. The policy committee accepts your thanks. But no, as serving on that committee, you know, and we sometimes say this at the board table, but we do always want to make it clear that like so much of what we do, right, happens in great conversation in those committees, that even though it seems like we're taking a quick vote, we've really spent a lot of time going over these, making sure that the changes fit both legally what we're expected to do, but also reflect our priorities and community and our values. And there were a lot of these are relatively simple changes. A lot of these reflect, you know, things that are happening at the state level. But some of them really are things that we need to consider and make sure that we're keeping up to date with. And I'm proud of the work that we're doing. So I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that we're, you know, we spent a lot of time on these. So
Thank you. Can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
Trustee Jasinski?
yes.
And I will vote yes, and the motion passes.
Thank you. Item 9.2, curriculum and instruction, Dr. Ioannis?
Thank you, Mrs. Van Heitzma. In the spirit of diversity, equity, and inclusion, this month's Insight into Curriculum and Learning video series will focus on windows and mirrors. You may have heard those statements before, but we want all of our students to, first of all, see themselves in our curriculum and in our instructional practices. That's the mirror component. And the windows component is we want our students to be able to look through a window and view other people's perspective and get a better understanding of that. So I will turn our attention to this month's video that focuses on that.
Schools, our educators utilize a concept called windows and mirrors in their classrooms to provide students with opportunities to see themselves and to see others in their learning experiences.
The concept of windows and mirrors means to me that I am providing opportunities for my students to be reflected and seen in their own community or in their own curriculum, but it also means that I'm providing windows for students that are not of those same communities to be able to see into a literal window of other people's experience, ethnicities, and in those communities as well.
When I hear windows and mirrors, immediately I think about perspective and identity. So when we're in the classroom, we're really looking not just at one range of texts or one range of authors, but we're making sure that we have a diverse range of texts and a diverse range of authors.
As an English teacher and someone who loves reading, writing, watching TV, watching movies, the concept of windows and mirrors, to me, I think about it through the lens of curriculum and through stories. And, you know, a window is where you are granted insight into someone else's experience, and a mirror is where you see a part of yourself reflected in either a story or curriculum.
To me, the concept of windows and mirrors means representing all the students in your classroom by their culture and family makeup and having them feel confident and comfortable sharing who they are within their classroom.
Windows and mirrors is something for me that I do quite a bit in my curriculum. It's the ability for students to use the mirror to see themselves in their artwork, see themselves in the classroom amongst their peers, and really kind of put their identity out there. And then Windows is opening that opportunity for students to get viewpoints of different perspectives, different people, kind of see the world in someone else's eyes, kind of building that empathy and understanding of differences and how differences are the norm, which we really try to embrace, especially in art.
So Windows and Mirrors boils down to two categories, storytelling and identity. I recently taught a poetry unit where I integrated the concepts of windows and mirrors by providing my students with poets who looked and sounded like them. So I introduced them to a poet named Sujata Bhatt, and she speaks a language called Gujarati. This is different from what most of my students speak. Most of us in my classroom speak English. But for a handful of my students, and myself included, we speak multiple languages. So I was able to offer more of that window perspective for students who were not used to speaking more than one language, but also offer a mirror for my students who did know how to speak multiple languages. And this led to some really exciting learning outcomes.
When I use windows and mirrors in the classroom for every project, mainly the impact makes it so the art is much richer, much deeper. It allows for students to really push the boundaries and be comfortable with who they are and comfortable with other people understanding that different in the artwork is good.
Using windows and mirrors in my classroom has made a tremendous impact on all of my students. It has given them the confidence to express who they are, share family traditions, share events that they do with their family, and represent who they are on a daily basis. One example I have, I've had a family who celebrates the Lunar New Year, and I've had the opportunity to have two of the siblings in my classroom, and they were able to come in and explain what they did during Lunar New Year, share pictures, and the joy in their face sharing who they were with their classmates made everything that you're doing all day long worth it.
One value in bringing in windows and mirrors into a classroom is it allows a student to express their funds of knowledge. Funds of knowledge is what a student brings from their previous home knowledge, their cultural knowledge, and just background knowledge that they pick up on a day-to-day basis. When students have the ability to present and share their funds of knowledge, that allows for a richer classroom environment.
I would advise my colleagues to include windows and mirrors at any chance that's possible. It can be something as simple as updating the decorations in your classroom to be more reflective of those that are in it, and also provide mirrors and windows into ones that are not as reflective as the people in our classroom.
The value of incorporating windows and mirrors to our classrooms it's immense. It leads to a sense of empathy among students, a sense of community, and I've also found that sometimes these windows can actually become doorways that guide students to new life experiences and new opportunities.
Special thank you to all of our teachers and staff members who continue to keep that core idea and focus of windows and mirrors and all that they do when they're planning their lessons, when they're working with our students and families. As you can see, that truly is the foundation of creating a welcoming and open opportunities for all of our students. So I commend all of our teachers and staff who are continuing to push forward in that very important work. I wanted to talk a little bit about February 27th. That will be now a day that students will not be in session, but our teachers and staff members will have a full day of professional development planned, and we are excited to announce those opportunities. The morning sessions will really include grade level content and collaboration, and some content alignment across the grade levels. So we're excited about focusing on math, ELA, and the sciences for our K-12 teachers. Also in the morning, we have provided some opportunities for our mental health staff to get together, social workers and psychologists, to begin to talk about some important protocols that are currently in place in the district and how to improve some of those protocols and some best practices around identifying behaviors for staff members and teachers. So that's going to be the morning session. The afternoon session is going to be building professional development time, so that means building principals will work with their teachers and staff members to focus on professional learning that would support the entire building and our district. Part of that focus will be our MyKIP goal, which is student wellness, student and staff health and wellness, so that'll be a component of their professional development time as well. Also, some dedicated morning professional development time for our paraprofessionals and crisis response. They're working with our students continuously on a daily basis, and behaviors are coming up all the time. So this will be a good opportunity for our paraprofessionals to have that time, and in the afternoon they will also be included with our building principals and our staff as well. So we are geared up and excited for this day, and definitely going to take advantage of that time that we have together. And those are all the updates I have this month.
Does anybody have any questions? Well, thank you. I definitely enjoy the videos. This one was really just really very nice one. I really enjoyed this one. So, pardon? No, I'm fine. I'm fine. No, so I do appreciate taking the time and the staff's engagement in that and your coordination of that. I think these are really good, and as long, I'm glad that it's something for our families to see as well and our students, so thank you. Item 9.3, Finance and Facilities and Bond, Mrs. Abella.
Good evening. I have 3 items tonight for your approval. 9.3.1 is a Community Service Budget Amendment number 1. For you to see here on the screen, I have the 22-23 actuals, the 23-24 original budget that you approved in June of 23, our actuals to date, probably as of last week sometime, and then the 23-24 budget amendment number 1 that I'm recommending for you for this evening. Just as a reminder, the Community Service Fund houses the Churchill Alternative Education Program, our Great Start Readiness Program, and our Free for Service programs, which include Latchkey and our tuition preschool. Some of the highlights from this budget amendment is there's a general fund transfer of just over $1.1 million needed to subsidize the fund. Some of the reasons that we do this is because all of the students, and I believe there's 73 FTE at Churchill High School, their foundation allowance goes directly to the general fund and not to the community service fund. So we could handle that differently, but what we do is we just transfer what we need to balance that fund to zero. There is a $378,324 increase to revenue, and the reasons for that is there's an increase of $275,086 of the subsidy from the general fund, an increase of $93,610 in Latchkey revenue just due to enrollment in that Latchkey program, an increase of $115,000 to tuition preschool. And I wanted to point this out. I didn't point this out last week because we do go through this in more detail at Finance and Facilities, is that this year there was a decision made. We had 3 GSRP classrooms last year. We reduced that to 2, which is why there's a deduction in the GSRP allocation. And then what we did was we added a 4-year-old tuition-based preschool. So that's why the tuition. So after we had our discussion last week, I went back and looked at that a little deeper. So the reason why tuition preschool went up $115,000 was due to the added classroom. We collect $630 a month per student in that class over 10 months. And then, like I said, we went from 54 students in GSRP into the 22-23 school year down to 36 students. Now, hold, because that's all probably going to change coming soon with the governor's budget recommendation. But that is what's happened for the 23-24 school year. So once again, there was the reduction in the allocation, and then there was a carryover grant from 22-23 in GSRP that we spent early in the 23-24 year. So that's now reflected in this budget. And then the increase of $378,325, yes, that balances because we get back to zero, is primarily due to aligning salaries, benefits, and contracted childcare. Are there any questions about the Community Service Fund? So you want to approve that one?
Can we have a recommendation, please? Mrs. Anderson?
Be it resolved that the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education approves the 2023-2024 Community Service Fund Amendment as presented.
Can we have a second? Mrs. Alexander, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
Trustee Jasinski?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, 9.3.2 on tonight's agenda is the food service budget amendment number 1. I do prepare this budget along with Mike Jacobs, our manager with Chartwells for our food service program. We have 22-23 actuals, the 23-24 original budget that you approved in June, our actuals to date probably about a week ago, and then the 23-24 budget amendment that I have for you this evening for your consideration. I just want to remind you that there is an intended structural deficit last year and this year, and that is primarily due to a spend down plan that we have with Michigan Department of Education due to our pandemic-free meals, different from this year's free for all, which is a partially federal, partially state, different free for all. Many districts, including Royal Oak Schools, had increased revenues. And we can only keep 3 months of operating budget within the food service plan because much of this money is federal, so there's federal regulations around how this fund is managed. So I just wanted for your review and to remind everybody that that is a planned structural spending based on a plan that has been approved by the Michigan Department of Education. Are there any questions? Yes.
Do you have a question? I think you've answered this before and I don't remember the answer. I know that we've encouraged everybody who would have been qualified for a free or reduced lunch to continue to fill out the paperwork. Has that number been consistent as
It
you
has
expected it
been
to be?
because, thank you for mentioning that. Some of our funding, including Title I that Dr. Ioannis works on, that grant is primarily due to our free and reduced lunch number. So it is important that families do, if they qualify, to apply for free and reduced funding, and it helps with many things throughout the district.
Any other questions? Can we have a recommendation, please? Ms. Usinski?
Be it resolved that the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education approves the 2023-24 Food Service Fund Amendment as presented.
Thank you. Can I have a second? Mrs. Alexander, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
Trustee Jasinski?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right, 9.3.3 on tonight's agenda is the Night Lock Shades contract. Previously, the district installed night locks on all instructional spaces around the building, and now this is to go back to those same spaces and install the night lock shades over the window area, where in the case of an emergency or drill, it's very easy for the people in those areas to be able to pull those shades. So this is through a cooperative bid. It is through Taylor Brothers, who is doing business as Nightlock. That is something that we discussed in detail at Finance and Facilities and for your consideration.
Are there any questions? Can we have a recommendation, please? Mrs. Alexander?
Resolved that the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education authorize the superintendent to finalize and sign a contract with Taylor Brothers Door Lock LLC, doing business as Nightlock, in the amount of $42,886.76 to furnish Nightlock shades. Additional 10% contingency to address any unforeseen conditions.
Thank you. Can we have a second? Mrs. Anderson, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
Trustee Jasinski?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
I have one small update for you. The governor did present her budget recommendation on Wednesday. The proposed foundation allowance increase for the 24-25 school year is her recommendation. So not approved yet, 2.5%, which is $241 per pupil. There were number of other investments outlined, including continuation and expansion of the Michigan School Meals Program. I'm not sure how we're going to do that because we're already at 70%, which is great, and we will figure that out. But investment in pre-K opportunities, so all those things I just said to you about GSRP, changes coming soon. Continuation of mental health and school safety funding, which is pretty exciting that there's a continuation of that. And continued focus on recruiting and retention of teachers. So those are some things. I did review the state aid fund. The balance sheet is out. The January consensus revenue happened about, I'm guessing about 3 weeks ago now. There was a small change in the school aid fund. It went up only $58.8 million. That is a small number when you think about the fact that we have 1.4 million students across the state of Michigan. Also, MSBO, which is my professional organization, the Michigan School Business Officials, is kind of cautioning us because there was a large investment in some one-time funding, even through the state of Michigan this year, just kind of outlining that we should be careful about those grants that we were given, and those may not continue because the balance sheet did not carry forward those those grants. There's a long list that I have here. Many of them do not relate to us. Some of them are very specific to some districts, but something that we certainly need to consider as we're moving forward and thinking about our 24-25 budget. So any questions? Those were just some quick updates. Yes, ma'am.
Could you remind us of the timeline for the state budget?
It is quite a long timeline. So we had the January consensus revenue hearing. The first thing that happens is the governor's budget usually comes out in early February. We have the May consensus hearing that will occur, I think it's usually the third Friday in May. Generally, you don't see the Senate and the House budgets until at the earliest spring break. Usually it's a little later than that. And then it's after that May revenue hearing where it really kind of heats up and you see something. So it would be nice if we saw a budget in June. Nobody's speculating unless Mrs. Fitzpatrick's seen anything. But nobody's really speculating yet when we might see a state budget this year. But I think even last year we set our budget prior to the states being finalized. So it's a long haul yet, but it is fun to watch it as it unfolds.
Any other questions? So I do have a question. So as you just mentioned too, like funding that's going to end, I think when we talked a lot about COVID monies and I'm thinking ARPA fund, you know, in this September 24 timeline, from the district's perspective, do we have a lot of funds with that specific end date?
We have at least 2 grants right now that have an end date of September 30th, 2024. They're ESSER 3 and then 11T, which was a subset of ESSER 3. Because those ESSER dollars were originally given to us in Title I funding format, so they went back and gave additional funds to districts that had lower amounts. So those 2 end in this September. We're working hard. We have a grant team that meets pretty regularly to make sure that we're on track with those grants. And we're certainly looking at some of these other one-time appropriations as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Item 9.4, Staff and Student Services, Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. I'll be taking the reports this evening for Mr. Walensky, who is not able to be with us tonight. Item 9.4.1 is the personnel changes being recommended for board's consideration this evening, and I'm very happy to see that the vast majority of the names on there in the contracts are to secure staff, so hired or rehired, and many of those are for some new positions, programs that we're opening mid-year, or for positions that we added to support our schools, clerks at Oakland and Upton, so that gives some secretarial support for those buildings with all of the things that they manage, as well as opening of our Level 4 special education program. And so we're just pleased to see that this report is filling those vacancies, some of which have been open for a bit, and we're finally able to secure a highly qualified and staff. I've met many of them as they come in to sign their contracts, and we're very pleased that that's what the report this evening entails. So that is for your consideration.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Can we have a recommendation, please? Mr. Jaworski?
Resolved that the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education hereby approves the following regular personnel changes as presented.
Thank you. Can I have a second? Mrs. Haynes, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Jasinski?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Item 9.4.2 is the emergency operations plans, and this is something that we were able to go over in detail with the board at our finance and facility meeting earlier this month. The district has always had an emergency operations plan, and there have been several updates in recent years to what those plans look like. But we utilize the plans for every type of emergency or crisis that might go on in a school. It may be something to the physical plant. It may be a need to evacuate a building. It may be due to a tragedy in the building that impacts the staff or the students, as well as what unfortunately publicly hits our schools, and that is acts of violence on school-age children or those working in schools. But the plan is very comprehensive, and I am proud of the work done in this district because each time we review the plan, we think about it with students, staff, and our community in mind. But we do not do it alone. And I was able, with Mr. Walensky and the staff, to present just some reminders that we now work with a large district committee here that meets monthly. And they review ongoing tasks with regard to AEDs and training. We just did a survey district-wide to find out which ones of our staff members hold special certifications or training, where some of the holes might be, but more importantly, where some of our staff might want to be trained, and now we're asking them for that, and then we can make those opportunities available. And it really ties together nicely with the safety and security grants that we're applying for, because the training can be paid for out of those grants. And so we do need a good list of who's trained in what type of activity across all of our buildings, and the survey that we conducted will help establish where our need areas are and where our strengths are. So the committee meets on a regular basis. We also have worked in this district several times with a safety and security advisor that we pay as a third party to come on site. Again, not only look at our buildings themselves, but our processes and our procedures for all of our staff. We know that it's vital, the way that we greet guests at the door. We swipe in, we buzz in. I do it at every building that I go to. And it's very important that we are consistent in those practices. We have teams working on unique needs within our schools. It's very different to operate safety procedures with 3- and 4-year-olds in a preschool, and then the role that our students play at the high school, and now the opportunity for a student advisory panel at our high school to advise on our practices and to help share plans and ideas with fellow students. Our school resource officer, the Royal Oak Police Department, the Oakland County Sheriff, they've all contributed to these plans over time to help us. So the template that our plan now exists in is certified by or provided by the Michigan State Police Department statewide, and we've worked with this template before, but it is a way to make sure that our plan is comprehensive and that it has all of the necessary details in it, including the work that we've done with our police departments. And so our processes, our procedures, maps, vital information is now readily available to every staff member in the form of red bags, emergency bags, and binders, which the board was also able to see. For security purposes, we do not post our emergency operations plans, but they are readily available to the staff and to the students who may need them and know about them. And we are also meeting next week because our technology plays a vital role in our emergency operations and plans and contacts that we have within the community. And so we're meeting next week to practice and drill with all of those security systems here from the board office. And that goes on regularly at our schools that our parents and our students, I'm sure, are well aware of. So tonight for your consideration is the next iteration of our emergency operations plan from the district as presented at FNF and for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. Can we have a recommendation? Ms. Susinski.
Be it resolved, the Royal Oak Schools Board of Education adopts the emergency operations plan for each school building operated by the school district as presented.
Thank you. Can we have a second? Mrs. Anderson, any discussion? I would just like to just quickly say thank you for the work that's gone into this plan. I think, one of our big priorities is student safety and staff safety. So this work is truly important. I'm sorry that it has to be, but it is. And I think that we take all the precautions that we can to ensure the safety of our staff and students. So that's really important. So thank you. Ms. Jasinski?
And again, just like Ms. Fitzpatrick said at the beginning, this doesn't mean that we didn't have an emergency plan prior to this moment, right? But the amount of work that went into getting all of the plans cohesive, easy to use, right, and available to the people that would need them, whether it's full-time staff or somebody visiting for the day, it was really, really impressive. And so I would just second that. And of course, like we said, it's, we always think about worst-case scenarios, but these things are really, really helpful. We have medical emergencies on, a regular basis. We have needs that we need to meet of both our students and staff, and this just helps everybody do that so much safer, and I'm very, very impressed.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call, please?
I will vote yes. Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski?
Yes.
Trustee Van Heitzma?
Yes.
Trustee Haynes?
Yes.
Trustee Jasinski?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Ms. Fitzpatrick?
Thank you. Just one other thing that Mr. Walensky generally reports on at our board meetings, and that is our enrollment. We have had very strong numbers for kindergarten enrollment for our class that will join us in September or August of '24. We also have a large number of students and parents enrolling for developmental kindergarten, but also a reminder that any students who may be moving into our community or those that are joining Royal Oak Schools in September, registration enrollment is open for them right now. And we do have new students already on the rolls that will finish at their previous school and then join us again in September. So I was able to talk with Ms. Harwood in our enrollment department today, and she said things are moving very quickly. And for anyone out there, it does help us make our staffing decisions easier if we know how many students to predict. So if you know you have an incoming kindergartner, especially coming into the district, either regular kindergarten or developmental kindergarten, we urge you to come in and begin your enrollment, which can start all online. And you can always call our office if there are questions. Thank you.
And Mrs. Fitzpatrick, can you remind us when Schools of Choice window is as well?
Absolutely. So beginning the 1st of March through the end of March the 29th, I believe, we are open for enrollment for limited schools of choice. And that means that we have a set number of seats that this board approved in December for each grade, kindergarten through the 8th grade. And this would be for students who reside in Oakland County, but are choosing to go to a district such as ours through the School of Choice program, but they do have to be county residents in order to apply.
Thank you. Any questions? We're good. Item number 10, public comment. Same rules apply as previously. And we do not have any public comment. Moving on to item number 11, board comments and liaison reports. Anybody? Mrs. Anderson.
I'd like to thank PTA Council, and I know Ms. Van Heitzma had a lot to do with it, for Founders Day on Monday. It was a really wonderful celebration of the work that the PTAs do in our district, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get together and celebrate that.
Thank you. Mrs. Alexander.
I just wanted to highlight the spring musical that Royal Oak High School will be presenting March 1st through the 3rd, and they're going to be presenting Freaky Friday.
Thank you. Mr. Jaworski.
I just want to talk a little bit more about the student lunches. I mean, Matthew mentioned, and we talked about the robotics program at the first lunch. Then unfortunately, Matthew had to go back to class, and he couldn't stay with us for the entire 2 hours we were there. But we had another student who came with her concerns about the compostability and recycling in the lunchrooms with the trays and the utensils. I think it's a very important thing that we look at as well. I think it's a great opportunity that the students have to basically have 45 minutes of the ear of the superintendent who gives her full attention to the students. So I do encourage anybody who's watching or anybody watching at home who has kids who are active or want to become active to definitely join us at these lunches, because this is really how things change and how things get done within your schools.
Thank you. Mrs. Sinsky?
Little voting PSA, as we talked about, right, that the schools are closed on the 27th because so many of our schools are polling locations. So I just wanted to encourage our community to get out there and vote. It's a presidential primary. I know that some of these elections, we've got 3 elections here in Michigan this year, so like don't get too tired yet. They're all really, really important. It's an important opportunity to lend your voice to the process of democracy. Monday, this coming Monday, the 12th, is the last day to register online. After that, you have to register in person at the clerk's office if you don't yet have a ballot. And remember, in Michigan, we have new early voting rules too. So starting on next Saturday, actually, is the first time that you can cast your ballot in person at the Royal Oak Senior Center. We're lucky to have a location just up the street. 9 days of early voting. Go take care of it so that you don't have to wait in line. And yeah, good. Go vote.
Thank you. Well, I have to do the shout out for the ROMS Drama Club kids as well. So they're doing Alice in Wonderland, and they're March 8th to 10th. So I think you can make the rounds, visit the high school, visit the middle school. I think that's really important. I did want to thank everybody for Founders Day and our PTAs for the work that they do within our schools and to support students, staff, and families. It's hard to be volunteers because it's a time commitment, and I know everybody struggles with work-life balance, but the importance of volunteerism, I cannot say enough about it. So we're grateful to have the PTA supports that we do within our district. A shout out to Mr. Jacobs too from Food Services, who provides the lunch for when we meet with the students. It's always kind of nice to have lunch brought to us, so it's a very nice. So a shout out to him and his team. And I also wanted to do a shout out to Lindsay Potterack for Teacher of the Year at the Royal Oak Middle School. So it's nice to see somebody who's just as emotional as I am, and but it was a cute little surprise, and she was very excited. And I know she's very dedicated as well as many of our other staff. But it was just nice to see her be awarded that opportunity. And I don't think anybody else. Oh, Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
So I do want to just add that as a district, we do nominate a teacher from each level, elementary, middle school, and high school. So the first secret was revealed from ROMS this week, but the high school and the elementary teacher are yet to be named. So we're getting there. And we are also nominating a support person of the year from Royal Oak Schools to the Oakland County group. So that will also be forthcoming.
Thank you. Okay. I think we're done. I will call us adjourned.